New look offenses around the NFL and a fury of activity near the NFL trade deadline today and this week. That and more this week on the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, we've got some pass catchers of note on the move. Calvin Ridley to Jacksonville, as well as Chase Claypool to Chicago. The two most notable moves. Plenty of teams not making moves like the Packers and others. But which one of those, Ridley or Claypool, has the biggest impact in terms of what they left or now where they are joining?
I mean, I think long term, Ridley's really interesting because right they're playing off of Lawrence's rookie deal, right? They'll have him at a pretty reasonable number next year if he comes back, and the compensation isn't too high, especially when you consider like what AJ Brown went for, what some of these other guys, what Marquise Brown went for, right? Like what some of these other guys have gone for in trades. They're going to get that opportunity with Calvin Ridley to try and rehabilitate his cost. And so I think that's a really interesting aspect of this. That offense could be really, really good, right? You've got Christian Kirk, Zay Jones has been better this year. You've got Evan Ingram, like you've got Travis Etienne performing at a really high level. I think by the end of next year, there's no excuse for Trevor Lawrence. Like he hasn't been really better this year. And he should be, taking a pretty big step forward if you expect him to be the Andrew Luck of this generation, which is, the generational label that was tagged with him. He has no excuse heading into next year. And so this is a really, really pivotal 18 months for a player that frankly was a mid-first round rookie pick without having done anything in the NFL. So or mid-first round startup pick without having done anything in the NFL. So I think that's a really interesting aspect, sort of long-term. I like what Doug Peterson's doing. I just don't know if he has the tools to do the job with.
Yeah, Ridley. I thought about the Christian Kirk signing almost like, and this is going to be a deeper pull baseball wise, so not going to get too geeky. But I remember when the Washington Nationals were building up and they signed Jason Worth to this nutty don't pay him the money deal, but they ended up getting other pieces as time went on, and they were able to build and almost push Jason Worth down to that. Well, he's our third best hitter. And we built above him. But it took that first big overpay to say, we're here, we're contending, we're paying. And it felt like Jacksonville said, let's get a guy that in the big macro picture of the NFL, if we're a strong offense, Kirk will be our 2 or our 3, if you're super strong. And it feels like now with Ridley, and what if they bring someone else in, whether that's a rookie or other notable player, now you're cooking with gas. But saying, we have Ridley, we paid Kirk, and now we get one more guy. And again, they're functional this year, but I don't think Marvin Jones has been what they wanted. Zay Jones, same thing. And Evan Ingram's on a 1-year deal. We'll see if he's back. But the building blocks now are 2 wide receivers, Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence, and hopefully one other pass catcher in some form for next year. But Ridley, again, I know our last optics are before was last year, man, just not looking the part, right? Looking like he was half stepping through routes, invisible in general. But before that, he had a top 20 season. He also had a top 6 season. So this is a productive player. He's older than most people think, but he has that in his DNA as an NFL producer that makes it pretty interesting where Kirk, we've seen him, not truly be that alpha, or maybe not even a Robin. So we will see if Ridley can at least be a Robin and maybe a Batman on this offense for next year. And Ridley's one that, frankly, I have a couple teams that I took over that Ridley was on there, and in some formats he's not, with suspension, not IR eligible, and that is a tough thing to look at every single week of saying not hurt, can't put him on IR, and just sitting there. But he had enough upside and a big enough profile that you just can't, if you weren't able to sell for a second plus or something like that, you just weren't going to sell him, because if he comes back, even at 28, 29 years old next year, that you're going to reap the rewards of that roster spot more so than turning waiver wire, most likely.
Yeah. And I could see as early, they're projected to be 5th overall right now in terms of their pick. Like, there's nothing to say that they shouldn't draft a wide receiver there, right? Depending if there's someone like it's totally justifiable that they sort of go back to the well. Right? You can't spend too much on wide receivers at this point. But I'm curious, like, I don't know, like Could that potentially be like, are they potentially in the market for another quarterback? Like, if Trevor Lawrence kind of plays like this the rest of the season, and they're going to have a top 5 pick, like we've had this conversation before. Um, you're sort of the philosophy that you don't stop taking them until you find the answer. Uh, like, I think they're in a position where, like, if there's a guy there, like, if they keep playing this way, if he keeps sort
There's
of
no
not
way.
playing to
There's
his
no
level,
way, Jordan. They will not do it.
I mean, I don't know. Like,
I
how many
know what
more
you're
times do you
saying
want to pick
though.
in the
You
top
keep
5 of the draft? Like, you know what I
It's
mean?
true.
Like, I don't know. I mean, this is, you find yourself, and then you find yourself kind of in the Atlanta problem. Like, Atlanta, they took Kyle Pitts, which again, he's like, we just had this, we're having this conversation with Pitts now, like we've had it with Hawkinson. Like, when you go with a non-premium position in that spot, you end up kicking yourself in 5 years, right? Because, like, we've seen this play before, and now sort of Atlanta's kind of stuck because, like, they're overperforming, and now all of a sudden, like, they're not going to be in a position where they don't mortgage the future, where if they'd just taken a quarterback there, they would have a guy. So I don't know, it's an interesting conundrum. I don't think they'll do it, but I mean, this is like, Lawrence has been playing this out for a while and hasn't gotten much better. So it's a really interesting developmental spot here for him.
That survival rate, 91%. 91% in year 3. So rarely. The answer is rarely. And I think he's above the baseline of saying he fits under the, again, I'm open to it. Take whatever quarterbacks you want. I don't think that's a bad decision, because the moment you hit on one and they're under a rookie deal, all of a sudden now you got a shot. You have a legit shot in the NFL, because now you have a window of time to build around, spend whatever you want, wherever you want. And, the world is your oyster. And then you have a legit Super Bowl chance. You should have, with decent management and decent build around smarts. Yeah, I was gonna say Chase Claypool going to Chicago feels like such a Chicago move. First of all, because I think a lot of people are going to be excited about this. I would say the volume is very low, so we're having trouble with the current weapons they have, and now you're going to split the pie a little more. And I would remind folks that Chase Claypool has almost been the exact tantalizing scope of what we typically see from the boom bust profile. That what do we see? Early flashes. It doesn't stabilize into a meaningful year over year. Oh, he's now one of those guys sort of role and prominence. And it sort of fritters away. What did they do? They drafted actually a high floor guy who produced a lot in college, George Pickens, basically came in, took his job, made him expendable. And there goes Claypool. So now Claypool's leaving, changing teams, going to another questionable quarterback situation. And you can say that the competition for targets is less. Darnell Mooney is certainly not on the level of Deontay Johnson and others. But you still have a big question of, are they going to pass the ball? When are they going to start doing that? How well are they going to do that? Are they changing quarterbacks? To who? Are they any better? And you do all these things. And then you say also, Claypool is in this 24-month window of, is he going to get paid? Why is he getting paid? How much is he getting paid?
Right.
Does he work? So it's interesting, though. The boom bust has been some boom weeks, but the longer we go, we haven't really seen a big boom in a while. And they were scheming up touches for him, like, I don't know, just trying to get juice from a rock, basically. And now he's out of there. And that's what happens. You get this physical freak in college and you go, well, why didn't he produce? I don't know. He'll figure it out. He'll figure it out at the toughest level of competition in the world, where we step up like 5 levels. Sorry, Notre Dame. And now you expect him to do that. He hasn't done that. So that's where we sit. And that's what typically happens. A guy that didn't produce to his level of athleticism and apparent physical dominance. And we see a guy that really hasn't gotten all the way home. He's been a wide receiver 3, 4, 5 T's in terms of best ball is the best format for him. And who knows if he's ever going to be a regular and predictable wide receiver 1 or 2 on his team. We will see. That's where we sit.
So you just said all of that, and I agree with it. Like, I think that's a pretty fair sentiment about Chase Claypool. And yet, at the same point, the NFL is now paying more for him than when he was drafted, because that pick is not going to be 49. Right? That pick is going to be before 49. So Pittsburgh drafted a player who is, by pretty much all accounts, underperformed, and is now getting paid for more than they drafted him after they had a couple of years of cost control. right? And basically a chance to try him out to see if he was better.
Steelers are upping their game. See, previous it was just
unbelievable.
drafting day 2 wide receivers and hitting on them, which is tough to do in and of itself. Now what they're doing is reaping rewards and then selling them for same cost or more costs.
It's
That's
incredible.
the ultimate.
Right. Where, and
Go
again, I think
Steelers.
there's a huge lesson here. There's a huge lesson here from what the Steelers have taught us versus what Detroit is going through today. And I think that like the biggest thing that we've seen, the Steelers have been on this. They've been on it for a decade. Take a day 2 wide receiver almost every year. And they keep taking them and they keep taking them and they keep taking them. And you just keep doing it. It's an embarrassment of riches. And you saw George Pickens get picked, and you're like, all right, well, how does he sort of fit in? He's kind of buried. And you know what? You just keep taking him and taking him and taking him. Because what happens? Like you then get to choose about who you want to pay. You don't have to overpay. And then you get people with a need that you have the supply and that they deal for and overpay, right? Like you're constantly in a position where everyone else has to overpay and you don't. Where you look at what Detroit does and they're chasing non-premium positions. And now when they want to get off of one of those guys, one of those contracts like Hockenson, they're taking a lesser deal than and Hawkinson's been relative to the position. He's been better first, as a tight end, and Claypool's been as a wide receiver, and they got less for Hockenson than Pittsburgh did for Claypool. That's a big dynasty lesson to me, right? Like you shouldn't be taking players up at the top of the draft. I think top, 5-6 rounds, right? Take premium positions, right? Take premium positions, sort of learn from this experience, because what happens, right? When there's a shortage, they become valuable, right? When you're taking wide receivers up there, what happens, right? Everyone's got wide receivers. You know why? Because there's an endless supply of wide receivers, right? Because it's really hard that they distinguish themselves. Whereas you take tight ends and tight end premium, which we're going through right now in a league that you and I have, we might talk about later. Take tight ends, you take quarterbacks and super flex or 2 quarterback leagues. You just keep taking them, right? Because then you're dealing from strength, right? Then you're in a position like the Steelers are, which is constantly being a good franchise, instead of being in a position like Detroit is, which is constantly being in a bad franchise. And you sort of look at these lessons, and I think that the Steelers taught you what a good team does, and I think Detroit teaches you what a bad team does historically, and that's a lesson that we should learn from Dynasty going forward. That's the biggest thing that I learned today.
Yeah, I thought of when you were talking about just having strength on strength. I think back to a 2 quarterback league where roster spots are not super plentiful. So you want to have like three starters, maybe 4 NFL starters, but you don't want to spend a billion roster spots to do so. And I just remember stacking over and over again. Like, let's remember back, Marcus Mariota was on the scrap heap, as a backup. So I remember though, I got him. I think I got Mac Jones in like a cheap deal or something at some point, but I put those together and I ended up getting that plus a running back or something, and I got Dak Prescott. And the big appeal or the big takeaway there is offering in a 2 quarterback, offering a team and actually having the latitude to offer 2 starters at the time, and timing the market of saying like, hey, they're starting, they're healthy, who's not healthy, getting Dak Prescott weeks ago, and just offering that of, I can fill your whole starting lineup right now. Absolutely. And that may not work. Again, it may not work to that level, but the concept there is taking those shots. And it really took my brain a full year to really get my head around that format, because normally I was like, oh, I'm so depressed. I wanted to have more running backs on my roster, but 2 quarterback with limited roster spots, you want solidity. Mm-hmm. And you just can't sit there and have 7 backup quarterbacks like a 30 or 35 man roster. So I had to recalibrate and say, just getting starters, live bodies, because I watched my first rookie draft. I think the 5 of the first 6 picks in the last year's draft were quarterbacks. Just over and over, they were taking quarterbacks, where ETN, I think, was at 108, 109, mm-hmm. or something. Like, it was nutty. So knowing that, then all of a sudden, well, you can go 2 for 1 probably in the trade market if you're offering starters. So that's the type of thing. You said know your format. And the other part I was thinking of is, how many draft classes have we seen where first round tight ends? I remember back to is it 2017, the OJ Howard Ingram class. Mm-hmm. I believe it was 17. David Njoku. All 3 of those guys went late first in a lot of leagues. Mm-hmm. 1 quarterback, no frills, no premium. And I think that's a very instructive lesson because, and obviously we have access to the results, none of the three have really strung it together and been one of those guys. And when you spend that much capital right away, and that was one thing I think we've talked about on various platforms of saying, drafting rookies, you kind of have to think, and tight end is a very fickle beast of development, usually slow. Getting to their ceiling can take a few years. We're seeing David Njoku. I guess this is it. We waited this whole time. You drafted him in 2017 at 111. Here you are. Congratulations. In your one tight end league, you finally got a few starts and now he's hurt. But don't invest in a position that we go off the waiver wire. You can trade for, like right now, what could you trade for Darren Waller? He's probably very accessible and affordable.
I got him for 2 seconds today.
There you go. So my point is, you don't have to bother and mess with the career arcs and the developmental curve and wait time, because the more and more I think about rookie picks, it's like if you're actually going to draft something, it's got to be like on a 2-year prism or less. It's got to be. And third rounders and later, even less. Because what are you doing? Most roster spots do not allow for that patience level. And so tight end, I mean, we've gone through these iterations. I mean, Mark Andrews hit right away, pretty much. But you could even say, I spent 111 3-4 years ago on Dallas Goedert. Has that real? Let's be honest. We like Dallas Goedert. We are pro Dallas Goedert in this room. But has that really panned out? Spending a late, let's say you spent a late first. I don't know if he was going there, but let's just say, is that a really good A decision and B outcome? Because it really is almost, I view it almost like a cop-out in a stock league. I'll take the tight end. I'll take, you took Pat Freiermuth at 203. All right.
Take Dulcich in the late second.
But what I mean is, but what I mean is like when you start getting up in top 12, top 15 prices, you have a very narrow band of what is actually a good outcome, in my opinion.
Right.
It's a Kyle Pitts discussion. People taking Kyle Pitts at 103, 104. I saw 101 or 102 in one of those random leagues last year.
Right.
Narrow band.
Yeah. I mean, it's constantly it's a constant, take the cheapest one of the profile. Right. And again, I think that's a good lesson that.
Well, he's a unicorn. So the cheapest one is, there's only one.
There's a lot of unicorns going around. That's one thing I've learned over Dynasty in the last 10 years is that there's a lot of unicorns going around.
How about this? How about if they start using the phrase now, there's unicorns, but then there's rare unicorns.
Unique.
There's the two-horned unicorn. The duocorn.
I will say, someone asked in the chat, can I finish, or did I finish really my thought? Yeah, in the NFL, the prices for wide receivers are astronomical, right? It costs a first-round pick to trade for AJ Brown and then pay him. Right?
Everybody but Amari Cooper. It costs for everybody but Amari Cooper.
Exactly. I mean, Christian Kirk went for, I don't know, 40% more than anyone thought he would go for, and it just absolutely spiked the market. I mean, Marquise Brown,
I'm going to call him Jason
over
Worth
and
now.
over and over and over again. Difference-making wide receiver ones have really spiked the market, and as a result, if I am Chicago, I'm probably looking at this experience and I'm like, okay, well, what happened to me? Okay, we got into the second round last year and we took Velus Jones. Right, or in a day two, and we took Velus Jones. Right?
No, call him end around Jones because that's all he does.
Correct. I find end around Jones, and that should stick. We should get shirts. Now all of a sudden, all right, that's what a day two wide receiver is going to get me. Right. I might as well take a shot on, whether it's a guy I like a lot more with Claypool. I got a couple years of cost control. Heck, I can tag him if I want at a number that might not be as bad, right, as I'd have to pay him. I really have, I've got this year, next year, and maybe the year after in terms of cost control. It's actually not that bad of a deal, as opposed to, right, you're constantly taking a loss on tight end. Why? Because tight end, elite wide receivers, true difference-making wide receivers rarely hit the market. Whereas you see tight ends hit the market all the time, right? And that tells us something, right? Don't draft a tight end high because you can get Evan Ingram, you can get OJ Howard. David Njoku was on a franchise tag and they ended up bringing him back, but Hunter Henry left. You could go on and on and on about the accessibility of tight ends, where it's cost an arm and a leg to get a wide receiver in the NFL right now.
Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 126 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. You like our content here. You listen to shows like The Audible and others. You want to get that written content as well. And the League Dominator, all that is over at Football Guys. The weekly projections, we've mentioned before, Gene Bramall is an absolute injury oracle. You get it's out Sunday night / Monday morning, and it really preps the week for the waiver wire, your expectation on who could be coming back, who's trending towards being back, who almost made it back the week before, and it really does clarify some decisions on the back end of your dynasty roster. You of course have the dynasty content, Jordan doing waivers of the future. I've got things like high leverage opportunities, dynasty trading post, and others. So you don't want to miss that content on a weekly basis. Subscribe to Football Guys. Give us a little credit that you came from the dynasty listenership, and you go to footballguys.com/dynasty winners.
It's time for the Stash of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
All right, Sleeper Stash of the Week. 2 candidates this week, but how about Brock Wright? Brock Wright is one that has been unleashed in terms of a secondary tight end, seeing a lot of snaps, seeing a lot of targets in recent weeks. And all of a sudden we look back, it's like, oh, because TJ Hawkinson might have been on the move, and maybe Brock Wright helped facilitate that, made that decision a little easier. Plus, we've got James Mitchell going out there into the 2 tight end universe. Quality prospect out of Virginia Tech. He was dinged up to end his college career. That kind of marred his pre-draft process, but still midday 3 picks. We got Brock Wright for the 1 tight end streamers. A lot of buys this week, and we're in the next 6 weeks of buys continuing. And then we've also got James Mitchell for the 2 tight end folks that are looking for maybe the next guy or the developmental talent that could have a bigger macro opportunity with Hawkinson gone.
Yeah, I like them both. I like them in the order that you set them in as well. 1.87 yards per route run for Brock Wright. Again, small sample size. It's only 47 routes, but again, that is encouraging, and he's been becoming a little bit more involved, and we'll get a true test here coming up about his viability. I was interested in James Mitchell coming out of college as well with that torn ACL. They like him, I think, and that was something that I covered I covered Detroit for Football Guys in the summer. I did the training camp reports, and it was one of those things where he was like, they were kind of waiting for him to come along, but it was a very positive sort of stream of news about him, and in the context of his development. So hopeful for him and that he gets back all the way back from this. I like some of the stuff that he did in college.
Absolutely. Yeah. Average 16 yards per catch, good producer, good size and movement profile as well. So don't sleep on him, as it looks like, from those mid rounds, you got Isaiah Likely coming out, Jake Ferguson. We haven't seen Charlie Kohler at all, but Daniel Bellinger, a lot of depth in this
We
class.
missed on all of them in our 2 tight end league, Chad.
Yeah, we tried. Yeah, we're taping things together with Band-Aids out of the pool filter.
Yeah.
And talking dynasty trades this week, actually, let's lead with just some of the strategy that we've been talking through, because you mentioned playing the position, and that's something, frankly, that years ago, we took on this team. We did a startup many moons ago, and we were both, a twinkle in our eye and probably more hair on our heads. Well, I don't know, maybe you a couple more hair. But we were in a situation where we had been going with Jared Cook and CJ Uzama were like our gods at tight end in this 2 tight end format, because we did not invest in the startup draft. We were taping it together. Uzama, until this year, was one of our all-stars and one of our MVPs, because he was in our lineup all the time and seemingly produced enough big games to keep us in it. But we've been swimming in the deep end, and we got to the point of saying, we've said for 12 months now, we have to fix this. We asked ourselves this critical question: do you really think, and we like what we've done at the other positions, where we have Deshaun Watson coming back. I think we got Russell Wilson. We've done some good things at quarterback. It's 2 quarterback as well. But we said, can we realistically win with posting such low anemic numbers at tight end? And I think we both realized and both finally said it out loud emphatically of like, I don't think we're going to win. Like we can be on the perimeter of the playoff, make the playoffs. And it's like, but you are giving up so many points at 2 starting spots that we said, how are we going to fix this? We've sent a ton of offers, and we ended up making a big trade. And part of the macro thinking is you said there were multiple ways to address a position, one of which is going after it directly, offering picks or players that you have. And we tried a lot of that to get tight ends. It's hard. So what was your ancillary plan on the macro that we can do to eventually address and balance out our team with tight end?
Yeah, I mean, my thought is like, all right, well, if we can't trade a player for a non-premium, right, a running back or wide receiver for a premium tight end position, let's build up some depth of picks, right? Because then we can sort of pick and choose a little bit better, right? It's a more universal currency. We can take shot on depressed players. It gives us, we can take more shots in a draft. We just talked about, not taking tight ends in rookie drafts, but there's a pretty good one coming out of Georgia in 2024 as well. Like, that wasn't lost on me when you said what year the picks were, right? You texted me and I looked and I was like, okay, like those picks are interesting in that year. It's a couple extra shots at that. So yeah, I mean, now I think, like, for example, like Tony Pollard right now, like, again, the mythical first about Tony Pollard, but if we could get picks for Tony Pollard, all of a sudden, right, can we sort of turn those in the next 6 months to a year? Can we turn those into a solution at tight end that maybe trading Pollard for that tight end right now might not be? All right. I will say, like, I went back and I just pulled up our draft. We made a couple of mistakes. In the vein of this conversation, it's interesting. We took Rosen. We could have taken a couple of different players. We could have taken McCaffrey or Lamar Jackson. But we actually did take 2 tight ends in the top 12. We took Jimmy Graham as tight end 12. We actually took OJ Howard as tight end 7. So we just whiffed there. If we hit there, it would have been, our reality would be much different if we had hit
Howard, because we still have Howard, and now obviously team change, expected him to get more love. He was with Buffalo coming out of free agency, and it was pretty much a minimal deal, and he exits there. Now he's with Houston, who plays tight end by committee with like 5 guys. But yeah, I mean, if he's on a first round track of even Evan Ingram, getting a decent 1-year deal that he's going to be the lead guy, that did not even occur for OJ Howard. And like you said, yeah, the trajectory of having a cornerstone guy. I still remember those conversations. What was that, like 2019 or something?
We passed on, it was 2018. We passed on, we did pass on Gronk for Mike Evans. And it was a longevity debate there.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
And I guess maybe like if I go back, we took Christian Kirk in like the 9th round. In hindsight, I probably would have hammered, and we took Lamar Miller in the 10th round. In hindsight, I would have said those are tight end spots, right? Like that would be the sort
just
of
take quality depth, quality profile, secondary zone, right? And then the other thing is, it seems like in general we've waited until the 3rd round plus of our annual draft to take tight ends. And one problem though is now you're looking, it's day 3 guys. In general, it's day 3 guys. Like, and we dealt away, like, for example, we had Kylan Granson. Not that I don't know if either one of us think he's going to actually turn into something of a traditional starting tight end ilk for NFL purposes. We'll see. But waiting that long means you don't get the day 2 guys. And so you're taking just shots. And we have, it's 40-man rosters. We can do that. But the problem was that obviously those are low upside bets, and those are probably more developmental, 2, 3, 4 year bets. So part of it was also, we just weren't comfortable with the reality that, well, if you want Pitts or you want, think of the draft classes that have come up, Freiermuth or whoever, Cole Kmet, think of where those guys have been going in drafts. And we just have not been comfortable because we're finding after quarterbacks and tight ends are going, we find value at running back, in say round 2 that we like. So that's one thing of, while, we built out plenty of running backs that we like over that stretch, like you said, eventually, well, if you're not turning the running backs into tight ends, what are you doing? What are we doing here? Because we tried to turn DeAndre Swift into a tight end, and it was interesting to see how dry the market was of like, how low do we have to go at tight end to do a even straight up deal? That was surprising to see the marketplace, but you have to play the league and you have to play the format of what the parameter and rules are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like over the long term too, like there's more pivots we can make. Like we have more, and again, just sort of, and I joked to you about how deep do we want to go. We could go pretty deep. I don't think we need to do that. I think we need to give ourselves options in the next 12 months about how to fix this position. The other thing too, like if you're making a deal like this, not all leagues have picks a couple years out. We trade
Right.
Eckler. Like there's more machinations to this deal. Essentially, we trade Eckler for 2024 first. That's how I viewed the deal.
Yeah.
Um,
And we love Eckler. To
we
be
do.
on
We
the
love
record,
Eckler.
we love Austin Eckler.
We do. But
Right.
I will say there's an aspect to this deal I think that's pretty interesting. If you do it 2 years out, right? Eckler's going through an awesome year this year. But if you do it through 2 years out, right, then you're getting into the late 20s of him. Is he still going to be this guy next year? Is he
And
going to
that
help
team
that
has
pick
older
get it?
pieces. Like you look at
Correct.
that team, and yes, they're contending, and both of those firsts are contending this year. But when you
Correct.
go 2 years out, you increase the variance. That team has no 23 picks already. Like we emptied their cupboard for the rest of their picks, including some fourths and fifths and stuff like that. Which again, when you talk about 40-man rosters, there's value to those. But that's where we got Pollard, right? Fourth round, something like that.
Something like
a few
that.
years ago. Anyway, so but going multiple years out with a strong team is usually preferable, just because you give that time aspect of, I think they have Hopkins and some older players where you say, if 2 or 3 of those fall off to where they're marginal starters or something else, all of a sudden that pick can turn non-playoff, and all of a sudden you're cooking with gas, and it looks like a runaway train. Where if Austin Eckler fuels a title for them this year as a key component, it certainly could be an easy win-win. But when you look at timetables, that's definitely a win now type of trade. And like you said, they paid those picks for non-premium position.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the other key, right? They weren't paying 2 firsts for, and something else for Kittle, and they're like, oh, well, we're a tight end away. Let's go get this.
Right.
Which is something we would do, right? I mean, we
Right.
would exploit, like that's a use of picks that now we have a lot more capital that might work in that fashion. So I love what you said. I think the takeaway though from this is that know your league, and where we might be used to having running backs that you can flip over to another position, or however the league is structured, we found out through sending dozens and dozens of angles and offers that it just was not going to happen, selling, say, running back depth for tight ends that upgraded our lineup and in a meaningful way. We could not get that done. So now, having more picks, either to draft the profiles that we like or to trade those and have a lot more candy to add on to deals, that is going to be more liquid, especially if we find an older profile of a team. I mean, I don't know where Darren Waller is, but what if in the offseason, like he's on a team that didn't make the playoffs, looking to turn it over a little bit, and we get a discount. Not saying you have to spend first for him or anything like that, but just having the flexibility of picks to offer in some sort of package.
Yeah. And I view this as like going to the doctor for some medicine, right? Like, all right, I cut myself, or, I did something stupid and I fell, right? Now I fell off my bike, doing something dumb. Now I got to go, I got to go get a shot, and I got to go get my arm reset because I broke it, right? Like, all right, like go sort of take your medicine. You kind of botched a little bit on the team builds, or I don't even think we necessarily botched. We just haven't really hit. I guess it's a little bit different there. Like we could have been a little bit more aggressive in terms of leaning into the profile. Like, someone hit on Kittle late, right? Mark Andrews was like 23 in the startup draft. Like you hit from there, it's a whole different world. We just didn't have that fortune. And so now we sort of have to take our medicine and figure out a different way around it, which we've done. I think the difference that maybe we're going through in this is we're not going to bottom out, right? We're just going to the doctor, getting the prescription, right? Getting the arm set, right? We're not amputating the arm, right? We're not, we don't have to go to like a full rehab. We just have to sort of put a cast on it, fix it now, and be back and, ready to go. We're not amputating the arm, right? There's a difference there in terms of the rebuilding, retooling approach about how you think about it. And, we're still like next year, we got good quarterbacks. Like if you got good quarterbacks,
we made a deal last year that was Fields for Watson, and we've been waiting on that, now for 18 months ish,
right?
Coming up on that. So,
and we haven't lost really. Like,
no.
Like Fields hasn't. Fields been okay, but like he hasn't done anything.
Right.
Like
what is he
Watson
really?
Changes our universe. You know what I mean? Watson really makes a big deal. So
yeah, Yeah, and I was thinking back to that deal where it's like, we had Jared Goff and people were probably like, oh, what's that going to do? Well, he's actually bridged the gap and been better than Fields,
Right.
now for a season and a half running. We got a trade in this segment from a subscriber, and this is a go-to segment we used to have, which is, did they acquired Mahomes, but did the other team get enough for Mahomes? And this is a big boy deal. So let's dial it up. This is like this is off-season mode. So Superflex, we got Matthew Stafford, Travis Etienne, your boy. Can I say your boy now? We've talked about Etienne a lot. Your boy, there you go. My child.
Warm, cozy feeling. Even though I hate Clemson, but it's a whole other story.
And DJ Moore. So you get 3 positions there for Patrick Mahomes. Did they get enough?
Mahomes.
Did they get enough?
They didn't get enough from Mahomes. They didn't get enough from Mahomes. I like Stafford. I like all the players involved. But I just think like the longevity of this, the ceiling of this, and again,
you've really got to hit. Well, here's the thing: the difference between Stafford and Mahomes, the gap seems to be bigger than it was 12 months ago. And with Stafford, is he on the track that I know we're getting kind of immune to quarterback ages, but he's an old mid-30s, right? I mean, let's not be surprised if 37, 38 is kind of it, for him. In the Matt Ryan kind of trajectory. Not overly mobile. He's still got the arm, but just he's had a litany of injuries he's both played through and not played through. And that takes a toll. So if he's out of this picture in the next even 3 years, let's say, I mean, Etienne has to be so good. And he's also on the older side, by the way. I mean, it's not that he's 21 right now. So you've already eaten up a little bit, and he just now arrived as a guy that you're confidently weekly putting in lineups. And DJ Moore, we'll see what we have with him. But that's if Stafford is on a shorter trajectory, and let's say top 6 or 7 production isn't really on his plate anymore, it's one that, again, this is going to reap a lot of rewards when you look down the line of team building.
I like DJ Moore. Like, I like him as a player. I thought he was awesome this past game. Like that, the high point catch, right? And then he, kind of blew it. But you
knew they were going to miss the extra point, right? You knew they were going to miss the extra point. You start thinking, you're like, wait a second, I don't know who Carolina's kicker is. Yeah, because they're that bad. That's why you don't know them.
Totally. We should have a whole PJ Walker segment right now.
How fun is it, though, that now we have NFL games with like 47-yard extra points? Drama. You don't fast forward ahead now anymore.
No, it's great. It's great.
On the edge of your seat.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing, like, again, talk about premium positions. Like, if I am going to pay for a quarterback, I'd gladly pay from the wide receiver position in Dynasty. It's different than the NFL. In Dynasty, I'll gladly pay from the wide receiver position to upgrade a quarterback. Like,
well, this is like super flex. I think in the 2 quarterback league, when I was making bigger deals to get, like, I had nothing, but it's like to get quarterbacks of note in a premium format, I was happily throwing in guys like J.K. Dobbins. And again, this was, before J.K. Dobbins or Cam Akers, or again, upside guys, appealing profiles at other positions, happily to do so. Probably not within my top couple wide receivers, preferably, but you running backs, that's why you draft them. You draft them so that you can potentially turn them into something that you can't draft, which is a unicorn profile like Mahomes. All right, let's get to a couple rapid fires here for one quarterbacks. We've got Rondale Moore for Daniel Jones and a second and a third next year from one quarterback here. So Daniel Jones probably just to level out that deal in terms of roster spots. But what are your thoughts on Rondale Moore?
I think he's interesting. The problem is they have Marquise Brown. They've got Hopkins.
Yeah.
I think Rondale Moore's interesting in the sort of between
the prism of he's one of 50 wide receivers,
right? Between now and when Marquise Brown comes back, but then he's wide
long
receiver.
Term. How interesting, right?
Right. So give me the picks. Like, I would just rather have the picks like that. This is if you dial it back and think in every trade, what's the premium side of this? Is it
picks? A second you can trade for a wide receiver probably better for your lineup than Rondale Moore.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, doesn't that answer the question?
100%.
Irrelevant of what you feel about Daniel Jones. Erroneous. Erroneous. All right, we've got one
Oh, I
quarterback.
have a question
league.
for you. More career starts the rest of the way. Daniel Jones or Philip Walker? PJ Walker.
Um, mhm. Daniel Jones, I mean, would have higher odds for me.
Okay.
It's interesting though. Those odds are changing by the day.
Walker's
Sportsbook is
had the
changing them.
second best PFF grade of any quarterback in any game this year.
Speaking of, man,
Listen,
the time I talk to you, it's something about PJ Walker.
well, it's usually about Geno Smith. Did you realize that of the top
Yeah.
5 PFF grades in a
I know
game
those are
this
two
week,
of them.
you want to guess that? You want to guess that who has accomplished them? 2 is number 1, Walker's number 2, and then 3, 4, and 5 are all Geno Smith. It's like it's really fun. And on like the flip side of that, when you look at the bottom 5, like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, like all these guys that we spent all these premium assets on, all this time and all this energy on, right? They are the ones that have been kind of whiffing out. Like
I can't
Zach Wilson.
imagine the chip on the shoulder of Geno Smith. I can't
Yeah.
imagine how much he's enjoying this.
Right. You got to be really enjoying it.
New York market. But he was in the New York market twice, right? He was on the Giants too.
Yeah.
And and that not working out, it's just like to just stick it to everybody.
Yep. Geno Smith,
He was on the waiver wire. That league we just talked about, we got him off the waiver wire.
Right.
In a 2-quarterback diabolically deep league. That's how I looked around. I literally looked at NFL depth charts. I was like, well, he's a primary backup. I was like, I gotta, let's pick that guy up.
Fine.
He was literally one of the only guys. It was like Colt McCoy was like vice script at that point in time. And it's like, well, Geno's available.
Yeah, and we've got Walker on that team too. Like we've got to
see what we haven't explored is quarterback into tight end. We haven't tried to turn quarterback.
It has had zero luck. I have a theory about this.
Well, what's funny is we the crux point of the trade was like, oh, you got to get PJ Walker out of there. We did. Ultimately, we did. But it's like, that was funny that was your big stick point. You're like, oh, well, now we got to.
I absolutely don't want to give up PJ Walker in this deal. How do we make that happen? And I knew that whoever was on the other side of the deal wasn't going to think of him in the way that I was thinking of him. But I'll be honest with you, it's interesting because like if you go back to this team again, no one cares. But we have Wilson, Walker, Smith. We had Matt Ryan. We had Goff. We have Deshaun Watson. And so we have a lot of options at quarterback. I actually think something that I found, and I'd be curious to sort of look at this longer term and get your opinion on it. But one of the things that I've seen is when you have a premium position like quarterback in some of these leagues, what you tend to not find, at least I have found, there's a dry market for selling those depth guys, whether it's guys like Walker, guys like Goff, maybe Geno Smith's going up a little bit higher. Maybe he's a little bit more relevant in this type of conversation, but it's really tough to trade them because what happens is the people you're trying to trade them to are contending teams. And a lot of times they have quarterback figured out. What I've found is that the teams that really don't have quarterback figured out that would presume, that would have a need for a player like that is actually not in the market to buy. Because they're sort of in a rebuild. So, and in reality, what I think you can find is that there's actually more of a demand for tight end in some of these leagues. So I think, just sort of, hammering the volume in these tight end premium leagues is, I think, super valuable. Again, it's valuable at quarterback because I think you can sort of build, right? We're building something with our quarterback room. But I think at tight end, I think it can be even more valuable when the premiums really get jacked up because there's a even lesser supply than there is quarterbacks.
Last trade this week, we've got one quarterback, Ezekiel Elliott and Aaron Rodgers for a 23-second, looking on the early side.
Man, like Rodgers showed. I was at the Bills game this week, and it was like Rodgers showing very little interest. It was like, all right, well, let's try and run the ball laterally. I'm like, okay, like that's that's fine. Like, just again, it's like, all right, so Aaron Jones ran for 7 yards a carry, and it felt like he didn't really it didn't even feel like it was like that, like much of a big deal, right? So, and again, that was like a good running back performance. How does Rodgers change his universe? Like, how does he change his reality? Like, I don't know. Like, they're never going to draft that. They're never going to trade for anyone. They didn't today. Like, that was never going to happen. Even though they want to put out like, all these quotes like, oh, we tried. Like, you didn't. Like
You offered a fourth for Chase Claypool. You weren't
right,
close.
we have our strict regiment of like measurement requirements at the wide receiver position. And like that is helping you a ton right now. Brandon Cooks would absolutely not fit any of those, but it would be by far the best wide receiver in the state of Wisconsin. But
Bubble wrap Christian Watson. Start with
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
See
seriously.
what you got there.
Um,
You're focusing a lot on the wrong side of this deal, by the way.
yeah, I am, but I just figured it would mention Rodgers was on my brain
Yeah.
because we just saw him lose. I mean Zeke. At worst, Zeke's an injury away guy, right? Like that was the initial thought that I had.
Wow.
And I still think he's a starting running back.
Rip
They
that
are going to
quote.
go back to them is sort of my thought, and I think he's worth more than this probably alone. But I did want to mention Rodgers.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think the Zeke market has fallen to where buying at a second price is possible. And as we saw in this one, I mean, you're paying less than that because Rodgers has a little bit there. Even if you think he's lost a little bit, that he's still in your top 3 rotation. And he's one that the volume is such that, I mean, his contract is, unmovable basically for the Cowboys. And so he's going to be the starter. And his odds of outlasting Tony Pollard on that roster are still quality. So again, not paying a first, all of a sudden we're having a much different conversation about acquiring and or holding Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to dumbest thing I did this week. It was actually, exactly 7 days ago because it was asking Jordan an open-ended Kyle Pitts question at 59 minutes and 30 seconds into last week's show.
Sorry, Joe.
Sorry, Joe. Sorry, Cease. Sorry, everybody. That was my fault. It added about 12 minutes to the show. I know listeners enjoyed it, but we have protocols. We have guidelines to follow.
Just blew right through it.
Exactly.
Right through it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like at 59:30 this week. If I just go tidbits, PJ Walker tidbits, got any
any developmental quarterback thoughts?
Fun story or no? Yeah. Yeah. Any promising graded quarterbacks? All right. Yeah. So let's get to quotes from the Footballguys forum this week. If you are a Zeke owner, you're better off trying to acquire Tony Pollard at a reasonable cost rather than sell Ezekiel Elliott. What are your thoughts on that?
Can you say that again? You'd rather buy
instead of selling Zeke, they said, well, just go the other way and buy Pollard. We're not in the handcuffing business per se. So just to put that on record, like us having a starter or a backup, like that doesn't influence our decision to either have or not have the other guy. So
correct.
Aren't they they would be similar priced, right? Don't you think? Is Pollard a first? What do you think?
I don't believe that has ever happened. You can tell me that he's worth the first, and I don't believe that's ever happened because we haven't had it happen. I've tried this gambit before. I mean, if Tony Pollard gets a first, I don't think Zeke's going to pull that.
Right.
I think, I mean, we like to buy low and sort of sell a high, right? I think as a general rule, you don't buy off of someone's last best game. I think it would really have to be a situation where I'd maybe buy Pollard would be, if we truly saw that this was going to change the landscape of his, right, of him starting, right? It's going to actually change the ordering of the Dallas backfield. And Jerry Jones came out with a giant bucket of cold water and just all over Tony Pollard.
Zeke's his guy. Zeke is his guy. And so, I mean, my sort of thought on that is you don't buy when that's the case, right? If maybe if it's going to actually be a buy side on a side like Zeke because people think, hey, maybe Pollard's going to take over. I was listening to bigger NFL media just today talking about that. So I think that's a sentiment that's out there. We'd much rather buy on the depressed value side of that than the high side of that. Generally speaking, unless it's a situation where it truly changes. Like I think, for example, we'll use a player I really like, Travis Etienne.
his reality has changed, right? And so he is ascending. We are buying high. I don't think maybe the market is reset high enough. And so that's sort of, well, yes, I'm buying on his way up. I still think I'm buying below where he's going to stop. Right? I think it's a different conversation. I don't think we're there yet for Pollard because I think that there's, again, Jerry Jones is out there with a giant bucket of cold water, dumping it all over the situation. That should probably speak to us in a way that I don't want to necessarily buy into that.
Yeah, and I think in general, the backup or committee running back with a clarified start, that's not the moment because Zeke wasn't even really ruled out until late in the week for this past week. Now you get a bye. Probably the most likely outcome is Elliott plays in week 10. So that, week 10, 11, 12, before the trade deadline in most common dynasty leagues, that's going to be the time to circle back because I am seeing Pollard, being traded for first on occasion, for Zeke plus on occasion. These are nutty things when you talk about profiles and timing the market. Like you're doing everything wrong. So wait till he's a backup again. And I still say Pollard is one of the most expensive backups out there. So I generally don't like to buy into the most expensive backups either. And we generally don't buy. We buy a discount rack, right? Like, oh, we're doing a different league. Oh, different trade. And it's like, oh, well, throw in, I don't know, Alexander Madison, or throw in Samaje Perine. Or like, that's the way we typically do it because those, a Perine minus guy in the landscape might be available on the waiver wire. Like Sony Michel's out there in a random league. I'll just go pick him up. Like
Travis Homer, here I come.
Like, sure, so doing it on the discount rack as opposed to like, let me pay a future first for Tony Pollard. He's way better than all the other backups. Well, he's like a backup plus, and so I get that every once in a while maybe you roll him out as your flex, but the point is he still really needs an injury to come all the way home and be a predictable start. And Perine's the same way. Madison's the same way. Let's name a lot of clarified backfields where that's what they need. They need the injury or a suspension or missed time by the starter. And whether you get that for a first rounder or a third rounder, a fourth rounder, or off the waiver wire, first come, first serve, even sometimes, that's what you're looking at. So why would you pay the first rounder? You do all the other methods first. And then you still have open roster spots? I find that hard to believe. So that's the main thing I think of, just like, and also, why are you trying to secure one backfield? Like, why is that so important? We've talked before about touching as many backfields as possible. Like, sorry, Joe. The that was a subtle one. But if you have 12 running backs, the best scenario in terms of encapsulating total market upside would be 12 different backfields. You could technically have 12 starting running backs of the 32 at one point in time, which would be amazing. I mean, if anyone ever had like the perfect storm week, that would be awesome to see. Every guy I have is technically the penciled in starter right now. But again, if you have 8 with 4 of the backups for the same team, again, we're pretty agnostic. We're going towards profiles and such, but you generally, don't proactively go out there and handcuff, because now you're guaranteed with those 2 spots to have one starter only.
Right. It reduces your variance. And I think the way that you win Dynasty Fantasy Football is actually embracing variance, which is to say that you don't want one backfield, you want 2, right? You want to be able to punch above your weight. And I think in short sample sizes, that's a big deal, right? And, we've seen this, right? We've seen the stories where the Tim Hightower story in week 16, the glorious week 16, Damian Williams, Raheem Mostert, right? Just go on and on about lists, heck, Devontae Booker last year was a huge asset to sort of get you through a good chunk of last year. Samaje Perine could be that guy this year. Again, he's like readily available. Like you sort of look at all of these guys, like it's more volume really than paying a premium for him. I'd rather pay a premium at wide receiver to sort of shore that up and create the ability for me to have more roster spots at running back, right? That's, I think, if you're sort of trying to fix running back, I think that's actually the better way to go about it. Not pay for running back, but pay for security at other positions that allows you to spend more time and energy and roster spots on the running backs.
Last one of the week. I would rather be lucky than good because lucky never loses. It's like a limerick.
Well, lucky, Right. If luck occurs, that's helpful, but luck doesn't always occur. Right. I think you're
Good luck predicting luck.
good luck predicting luck. That we should put that on a t-shirt. That's a t-shirt right there.
You go. Yeah. With a
No, I mean,
shamrock.
I'd rather, right. I think a lot of the trades that we do, I think a lot of the decisions that we see our subscribers make, I think that they're constantly improving their odds. Right. And again, it's small incremental stuff, right? It's small, but they can really add up. Right. And I think that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to sort of put yourself in a different, just at a higher floor, just a higher opportunity, a higher chance, because ultimately there is a lot of bounce in the ball, but like if you could sort of what you're trying to do is withstand some of that bad luck going against you, right? That's what you're trying to do. Build a team that in some of the weekly variants can sustain getting some of that bad luck, whereas you're not relying on it to win.
And we've all been there where you have a bye and you get ousted in that first game. You were hot and you got the bye, and frankly, you scored better that week. And sure enough, here comes the tidal wave, and you have a hot team at the right time, and they take out one of the top seeds. But you did the best you could. You want to bye. Like that's proper strategy and probabilities. Ask Adam Harstead. He'll tell you for 5 minutes on why a buy is a good idea and how much it helps your title chances. And so also though, I think, having good process and being proactive with your roster spots and thinking ahead. I mean, we can keep coming back to that Damian Williams example. Like he was the preemptive pickup that year and everyone was on Spencer Ware. And I can't remember if Spencer Ware was universally available on Dynasty waiver wires, a little bit, not much. But the point is gravitating towards who's the next man up. And Damian Williams was that guy, and he turns into a league-winning type player, or Tim Hightower, or the stories are not annual, but they're prominent across the fantasy football scope. And so looking ahead for, when those opportunities, you mentioned Samaje Perine, that's a great one. That's a high leverage opportunity backfield there that Mixon frankly isn't optimizing. I almost wonder if that's an Alexander Madison effect situation of Perine might actually have more upside than Joe Mixon. And I know that's just blasphemous for those that think Mixon is a difference maker. Yeah, watch how many times he makes the first guy miss, or just like kind of leans into him and the play's over. Even in space, he's just like, I'm going to go at you. That's it.
Right.
So not very inspiring with what he's doing with those opportunities. But look at situations like the Chargers. If that gets clarified and it's not Austin Eckler at some point later this season, there's huge upside there. We saw what Deion Jackson can do. For example, just to put 100%. One name out there that we technically already saw in a Dearness Johnson type of way of small sample size. But remember, you got to remember that someone might drop Deion Jackson over the next month, and you can just scoop them up with your attention paid for that roster spot and in that waiver cycle. But just paying attention and, again, not wasting a roster spot on like a third tight end in a ho-hum format where it's like, what are you doing here? Take one more shot on, if this occurs, I really have something here. And that's how Damian Williams, the luck finds you. So you need to be lucky. But I don't think really finding, allocating, holding, obtaining, like the methodology of getting the guy that makes a difference at the end of the year, I don't think that part about being on your weekly consciousness is lucky. I think it's a 3 to 4 month weekly journey and to-do list item that you're fervent in addressing. And then the Damian Williams situation finds you because you're always kind of looking for those scenarios.
Right. Just 15 seconds. Last year's in championship week, the top 5 scorers: Penny, Najee Harris, Darrell Williams, Boston Scott, Devin Singletary. Right. Go back to the year before. Yeah. Gaskin, Perine, Jeff Wilson. Right. I mean, just look at the guys that are sort of in that can really, really make a big deal. Dirt cheap, and being on them, sort of just constantly churning that is a huge opportunity.
More injuries to come at running back too. I track that closely. So we are not over with the Avalanche. All right. In this episode, we discussed running back a ton, some dynasty trading profiles like Chase Claypool and Calvin Ridley. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty.